What's up, everybody? Feel free to hang out with me as I go live today. You can debate me if you're an atheist, Muslim, abortionist, or a cult member. Love to have you up. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Alex O'Connor's video and on Christianity and how close he is getting to it, as well as reviewing some other like videos. So feel free to like, comment, and share. And just feel to chill with me. Or if you want to debate, let me know, and then I can kind of stop what I'm doing with the review. And just glad that everybody is here. I'm going to start to get into Alex O'Connor's video. I had been doing this before, but I had did it wrong and I wasn't sharing my audio. And so now I'm just going to make sure that I'm getting my audio going through by starting his video from the beginning. And so chat and let me know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions, and I'm going to start making sure that I know what I'm doing when I push play so you can hear this.
Right, can everybody just chill out a little bit, please? Alex O'Connor just admitted it. Christianity might actually be true. He debated Christians for years, then admitted this about Jesus. Did Alex O'Connor convert to Christianity? Alex O'Connor is no longer an atheist. Alex O'Connor, no longer an atheist. Here's why. Alex O'Connor, no longer an atheist. Here's why. Part 2. Alex O'Connor just admitted this about Christianity. Did Alex O'Connor change his mind about Christianity? Are you ready to die, cosmic skeptic? Okay, that one actually sounds a bit like a threat, but I'm sure it's driving at the same thing. Okay, so what happened? Something super significant must have gone down to cause all of this ruckus. Well, I'll tell you. I recently had a conversation with Bear Grylls in which he asked me where my study of Christianity and theology has led me, and I told him, wait for it, that I think Christianity is more plausibly true than the new atheists do, and than I did when I was a teenager. Can you believe it?
But you've had such a journey and you've met so many amazing people and you've debated so many different angles and things.
Yeah.
How does it?
Have you seen anything like this at the drugstore? No, you haven't. Look, Optic is making the most beautiful.
Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, well, can you believe it?
But you've had such a journey and you've met so many amazing people and you've debated so many different angles and things.
Yeah.
Where's it led you to?
It's led me to, well, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was really popular, the debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism.
Yeah.
And it was this body of
And new atheism was donkey brained. New atheism was straight up folly. And so he fell into that. And now he's going to say and show how it really wasn't as airtight as he thought it was. But think about all the people who believed that was amazing. Think about all the people who are his followers from that time that are a little disappointed that he's choosing not to be donkey brained anymore. Like that has to hurt their feelings, right? Because they still have a donkey brain and think like the way he was thinking. But I thank God for his honesty.
Like atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular and stuff. I've spoken about this a lot on my show.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
You know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was
Yeah.
really popular, the debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism.
Yeah.
And it was this body of atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular and it had this sort of quite strident, debate me bro kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought it was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then
Yeah, you were starting to grow up. And Richard Dawkins still hasn't grown up. Richard Donkey Brain Dawkins is still spouting that same nonsense. And if I have time today and I feel like it, I'll put up Sam Harris here in one of his latest discussions about the self not existing while he's talking as a self and then boasting and somehow meditating as a self. Watch this, to lose yourself. And then he'll compare that to kind of how you can lose yourself in a hobby or be so busy in life that you get into a flow state. He'll compare it to that. So his mentors at that time are still donkey brained today. Daniel Dennett, still donkey brained. Sam Harris, still donkey brained. Richard Dawkins, still donkey brained. Thank God that he saw that those kind of arguments were 100% inflated nonsense. Now, he may not say it in those words, but I am happy for him. And I know people that know him, and I'm grateful for the relationship that he's having with genuine Christians and that he's talking to Bear Grylls. Like, how cool is that? That Bear Grylls is a Christian. I love it. And Bear Grylls sitting there petting his dog has got to be one of the most chillest people that you would want to talk to and open up to about this. So I'm so happy that this is happening. I'm not going to interrupt too much, but I'll get flagged if I don't interrupt enough. So be patient with me. Let me just let this play through for a little bit now.
Where's it led you to?
it's led me to, well, I used to be quite on board with the new atheism stuff. I've spoken about this a lot
What
on
is
my
it?
show.
I'm
So,
sorry, what does that mean?
you know, like the sort of Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, it was
Yeah.
really popular, the debates that they were doing, they called it new atheism.
Yeah.
And it was this body of like atheist thought with the God delusion, this kind of stuff, which was really popular. And it had this sort of quite strident, you know, debate me bro kind of attitude. And I was really swept up by that. I thought it was really exciting and cool. And I was beginning to sort of shake that off and grow up a bit, essentially. And then running the podcast, what I've realized is this is far more interesting and intricate. And I would say plausible than I'd given it credit for before. So, you know, I'm still not a Christian. Not true, not even plausible, but just more plausible than I thought when I was a teenager. And it was actually a clip of this moment, which went out on my second YouTube channel, that caused all of these responses. I mean, can you believe it? A non-believer in God, like me, is willing to attribute more plausibility to Christianity than someone like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens, or indeed his own teenage self. Can you believe it? I mean, I can't think of a single explanation as to why that would be the case, except that he's secretly on the verge of some kind of grand conversion. No, he's too clever for that. He would never become a Christian. It must be that he's realized Christianity is cool again, and he wants to capitalize on an...
I would never say that about Alex. I'm not saying that he's flopping sides because of it being cool. Absolutely not. And any atheist that would say that and trying to troll him like that is just jealous that they keep losing their folks to our side. Now, I know we lose people to their side, but when you think about it, it's actually a proof what we say is true and not for what they say is true. So, for example, would it make sense that a Christian would get discouraged over time with their relationship with God and go to atheism? Yeah, that would make sense, because Christianity oftentimes requires you to do things that your flesh does not want you to do, to deny yourself, to take up your cross, follow Jesus. Are there going to be times in your life that you may not want to do that? And that may affect your belief. Okay. And I'm not saying everybody becomes an atheist for that reason, right? But explain to me why an atheist would be a Christian if the arguments are that solid about God not existing in the same way that Santa Claus doesn't exist, right? Because isn't that the way they make fun of us as Christians? We just believe in Santa Claus. We believe in magic and wizards. When was the last time you heard an adult go from saying, I don't believe in Santa Claus, to now I believe in Santa Claus? So this whole idea that Christianity is equivalent, or the belief of God, just as he's talking about here, but he does lean towards Christianity because obviously it's the only true religion, obviously. And I challenge any Muslim to come and say otherwise. Okay. I want you to think about this. Why would anyone start believing in Santa Claus today? Why would anyone in the world have any reason to do that? They wouldn't. So believing in God is not the same as believing in wizards and flying spaghetti monsters and all of those things. And that's what he's going to talk about now in this video, how it's more plausible than he thought it was. So if you think you can do better than Donkey Brain Dawkins, if you think you can do better than I don't exist, but I pretend to exist and do meditation, Sam Harris, if you think you can do better than Daniel Dennett, my life's a hallucinations, but make the best out of it, then you're more than welcome to come up here and try that donkey brain stuff. But right now, let us just rejoice as Christians that we have an honest seeker that truly sees Christianity and the belief in God is far more robust than he did when he was a trolling atheist hanging out with his trolling friends, right? Like just take that moment as a win. Not to mention Ayaan Hirsi, who is now a full-blown Christian, and had her discussion, which I did on this channel as well. If you would like to see it, I did a reaction to it. Probably 3 people watched it. But if you want to see Ayaan and Dawkins, let's see how close I can spell her name. That was my best guess at it. Yes, right here. You can watch that, and then you can go to my channel and watch that discussion. Thank you guys for checking in today. Always good to have 2 or 3 followers. If you guys have ever heard that meme that or that reel that says, I just had 1 follower and I just kept streaming for that 1 follower. That's where I'm at right now. Literally yesterday, I had one live audience member. We were talking, going back and forth. And if he's joining with me today, I said that he could come back up. So it's not the same. Let's just be honest. It's not the same when a Christian becomes an atheist as it is when an atheist becomes a Christian. In our worldview, it's perfectly understandable why a person who had once believed in God wouldn't do that anymore. Why? I did it, by the way, when I was a teenager I was raised in church, turned away from God as a young teenager. And then as an older teenager, I turned back to God. And then as I got older, to my later teens, I went away from God. And then right at my last bit of my 18th birthday, right before I turned at 19 in November, 1995, when I was 18, I gave my heart to Christ. So it was like in, out, in, you know, it was like if you've ever watched The Office with Michael Scott and what he did for a vasectomy, it was clip, clip, you know, he does that little scene. That's how it was for me, right? That's how it was for me. Well, it makes perfect sense. Why would I be doing that? Why would I come in and out of Christianity, even my belief in God? Why would I do that? I would do that because I hated what Christianity was asking of me. I believe in free will, which, by the way, if you don't believe in God, you don't even have free will. You're just a dancing monkey to your DNA. So dance, monkey, dance. Okay? You don't even have a soul. You just have an aping mind. You're a mind of an ape. That's all you are, of a primate. Okay? So going back to this, it makes perfect sense why Christians at times, even our book describes this, like Solomon and Job, that you can get super close to doubting God through your struggles in life. But once again, why in the world would anyone believe in God if it's the equivalent of believing in Santa Claus, or go from not believing in God to having more reason to believe in God, like Alex is saying here? If it's like Santa Claus, you have never heard of an adult now believing in Santa Claus that is sane. And yet, if you listen to the atheist trolls, who will see if we can get up a customer here to give us some business today, and they can try their best on me to convince me that I am the equivalent of a Santa Claus believer. Let them try to assert that I am the equivalent of believing in Santa Claus. Let them try and do that, okay? Got a couple questions here. I'll be stopping along the way to take chats. Hope you enjoy this. Whatever I can do for you on this Wednesday. Just getting into religion. Why don't we hear more about Jesus as a teenager? I did. I was raised in a Christian home, James. I don't know how you were raised. It could have been that. Also, we live in a very secular world, and especially in the Western world and society, and that might have been a cause of it as well. But I welcome you to religion, and I hope that you choose the Christian religion. I know he took his mom to a wedding and turned water into wine. Never thought about him as a teenage young adult. Oh, you're talking about Jesus. Sorry. Why don't we hear more about Jesus as a teenager? Got to learn how to read. Let me leave this up here. Yes, because it wasn't important for us to know. There are gospels that come after our gospels, way later. And they were written in the names of our apostles, and they were rejected by the church, and they are not historically reliable. And they try to add in more of Jesus's early years. The idea that we want to keep up with the Kardashians or keep up with Jesus like we keep up with the Kardashians is a very noble thought and a very noble theme. But according to the Bible, his adolescence years were unimportant to what would be transpiring in his life. The Bible is very clear that the Messiah had a role to fulfill, and we needed to understand that role, not what he did as a child, what he ate for lunch, what he did working with his father and mother and so forth. None of that would be important to us. So if you now just want a more fuller explanation, you would think about what was the cost of writing, what was the time that was involved, the Christians being persecuted, many of them dying their deaths early on. Why would this be important to them if it wasn't important to God in his Old Testament? In other words, the Old Testament prophesied the Messiah would come, death, burial, and resurrection. He would bring the Gentiles in. There's no prophecies or anything in the Old Testament that would give us an autobiography of his teenage years. So we just have to say it's not important. Now, if you would have been around and talked to Mary, I'm sure would tell you what was going on in his teenage years. And I don't think it would be anything different than what was going on in those teenage years because of anybody else, because when he receives the Holy Spirit at his baptism and he's inaugurated into ministry, he has, like his cousin John the Baptist there. There's people who grow up with him, his siblings, others are coming to see him if you read the gospel. And there's nothing controversial about him. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. When he starts doing miracles in his area, the onlookers say, don't we know him? We know where he lives. We know where his family's at. So there wouldn't be anything controversial about it. So we don't have anything to fear about somehow his reputation being tainted. And then once again, if there's nothing important about it, nor controversial. Why would we hear about it? So it's not controversial from his enemies or people who are doubting him, and it's not important to his followers. We can just go on and take what matters in those 3 years that he gave. There's plenty there. There's plenty there to give your life to. Plenty there. And making wine wasn't as a teenager. That wasn't as a teen. That was in his 30s. That was after he started his ministry. Yep. So that was as an adult. Let's go back to this.
Increase viewership by leaning into Christianity, thereby making a whole lot more money. Okay, so here's what really happened. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you'll know that I'm quite a staunch critic of Christianity and religion and theism in general. And when I was like 17 or 18 and I started making videos, I was a lot more forthright without atheism. I thought that atheism wasn't just true, but beneficial for society. I thought that religion was harmful. I was really in line with the new atheists like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, who influenced me greatly into a position that religion is just this utterly irrational and evil force in the world. In the past decade, I've come to see this as something of a shallow view. I think it depends on the religious tradition, because they're quite different. I think it depends on the time in history. I think it depends on the cultural context. And yeah, of course, any historian or sociologist will tell you that it's never as straightforward as I think the new atheists made it out to be. But also on the point of God's, existence, I also think that the new atheists didn't really give enough credence to some of the arguments for the existence.
You think? He's going to explain why he's going to say this in just a moment, but you think? And this is why I don't want to mock him. I'm teasing. This is a tease. I will mock others, right? But I'm not mocking it. I'm just teasing, because it's like, hey, you think that they might have overlooked some things? You think they might have rushed to conclusions a little bit too fast? You think they were a little bit too sure of themselves? That's what we were saying. I lived through this. I became a Christian in 95. I lived through this after 9/11, and they went on the book tours and did all of that. They were donkey brained. It was redonkulous, the stuff that would come out of their mouth and how they thought they would eat or cook, as the young people say. They weren't cooking. They're not cooking now. If I have time, I'll put up Sam Harris's discussion on the self, where he doesn't even think you exist, and yet you can do yoga to then get to a non-existent. So you're non-existing, and then you do yoga to get to non-existent. So no self, no self. They are a walking bag of biological chemicals and contradiction and all that they do. So hats off to you. Alex O'Connor, respect, man. Or as someone from your country would say, booyakasha, respect, Ali G, right? That's what he would say.
Of God. Richard Dawkins, for example, in The God Delusion, spends 2 pages on Thomas Aquinas' famous 5 ways. 2 pages. And I think in a way that doesn't properly deal with the significance of the arguments that Aquinas was putting forward. Now look, I still don't believe in God. Okay, like I just don't think that it's true. But what I will say is that when I was 17 or 18 and I was swept up with this kind of material, I thought that all of the arguments for God's existence were complete nonsense, and that all the arguments against God's existence were an epitome of perfect rationality. I've now come to prefer the term agnostic over atheist. I mean, it's a problem in itself, even trying to define what God is and what God would look like. But I think there are good reasons to believe in God. I also think there are very good reasons to not believe in God. And some of
Yes, thank you. And we've always said this, even though we got to be careful about how we push people out of atheism into agnosticism, because sometimes we can push people out of atheism into agnosticism, because we also sometimes try to push agnostics into atheism, right? So we got to be careful as Christians and theists how we do this. And what we're trying to say as theists when we're making these arguments towards folks is that what we're hearing you say is that really you don't know. And that is the better position of agnosis, agnostic, no knowledge. That's really your position. And therefore you need to humble yourself and do Bible studies. That's what an agnostic needs to do. But then they get so prideful and sure of themselves. Not saying Christians don't do that as well. Everybody, is tempted with pride. They get so sure of themselves that then they become atheists, no God, and now they're making claims. They're making knowledge claims. So they go from not having knowledge to having knowledge, and they make those claims, and now they got to back it up. And then they think they don't have to, and then they say that it's not a worldview, it's just a lack of belief, and then they go down this spiral. And so it's actually a good sign for him to say, hey, I'm in this tricky spot. And I know there's arguments on both sides. And then he's going to start describing what he's going to do moving forward. But that's actually more honest. And to me, that would probably be the best position to be in, other than a deist. A deist to me would be one step higher than that, which deism would say, I 100% affirm and agree that there has to be some type of higher power or godlike figure over this. It makes no sense otherwise from a teleological design stance or a cosmological beginning stance of the universe. These, kind of concepts we've had around for a while, like he's talking about Thomas Aquinas and how Dawkins only had 2 pages developed, dedicated towards the evidences of God that still are the evidence for God, right? And so the idea is, as an agnostic, to study that, and now to learn and to think about design, to think about God's omnipresence and how he's with us and so forth. And he also mentions that there's other arguments against that, but those are really emotional arguments. His greatest argument, I believe, against God is an emotional appeal to there being evil in the world. And so we have to be careful with that. James, you're walking with us through this conversation today. I appreciate it. I'm just here reacting to a video. So I'm going to give you a scripture that tells about in Hebrews about how Jesus grew and how he knew God and had a relationship with God in his adolescence. Okay, but we're going to get back here to Alex O'Connor.
You might be thinking, what, like good reasons to believe in God? What are you talking about? I don't mean like conclusive reasons. I don't mean that I have like an argument which should compel a rational person to say that God exists. I just mean that there are like compelling considerations. And look, I don't really want to go into them now, and I don't have time exactly, but that's not even the point, because all this video is a clip from a podcast in which, by the way, Bear Grylls just like asks me, where has this led you? And I say, like what, since the beginning of my career? I mean, I think it's more plausible than I did when I was a teenager. That's it. That's not like an extraordinary thing to say. I mean, if you were listening to a Christian who started out when they were 17 on YouTube talking about like why Christianity is definitely true, and someone asked them 10 years later where their exploration of philosophy had led them, and they said something like, I've got to say, like, atheism has a lot more going for it than I thought when I started when I was 17. It posed a much sort of bigger challenge. I think there are lots of interesting considerations. The problem of evil and divine hiddenness. There are really robust philosophical versions of this. They might say, as someone who's a Christian, I've realized that atheism is much more plausible than I thought when I was a teenager. And similarly, it shouldn't be that surprising to hear an atheist who has for the past 10 years dedicated his life to studying philosophy and theology say that, yeah, there are some pretty good arguments on the other side. And, speaking of not knowing what sources of information to trust and doing things for money, you'll also know, if you've watched this channel for a while now, that for some time I've been recommending a way to deal with bias in the online space. We can never get rid of bias, of course, but wouldn't it be great if there were a way for us as consumers of online...
So before he goes into his ad here about this news online source that kind of gives him unbiased news, he's being as honest as you can be. I don't think anything about him is a drifter. I don't think that he is taking it lightly. And if you're asking my prediction, I think he becomes a Christian. I remember watching this with Apostate Prophet and how he was never as antagonistic towards God when he came online. I don't know him beyond his online persona, but there was a gentleman who became a ex-Muslim and then defaulted to atheism and is known as the Apostate Prophet online. Many people in the apologetic space would know who he is. And he never was against God as much as Alex O'Connor was, but he would do debates and he would, take his
compromise quality.
He would take his stance as an atheist. Apostate Prophet atheist debate. You can probably look up his older debates if he still keeps it up. He's a Christian now. The debate that helped, here's the debate that helped convert Jay Dyer. Does God exist? And here he's debating Jay Dyer, right? Okay. So what we're seeing here is that when, like Alex O'Connor and Apostate Prophet, take seriously the arguments and stop brushing them off as if they are beneath them and said by Oompa Loompas on the same level of believing in Santa Claus, when you actually take serious these arguments, you'll see that even if they don't bring you, let's say in your belief to God, you need to go anything beyond 50% to believe in something. So let's say you need 51% to believe in God, and at anything less than that, 49%, you don't believe in God. These arguments may not bring you to 51% in belief in God, but they're certainly, if you're going to be honest, in the high 40s for anybody who takes it seriously, anybody who actually gets into the arguments. High 40s. And this is where you get Pascal's wager. And that's where Pascal was actually talking, who he was talking to, and the kind of audience he was addressing his wager to, which is, what do you have to lose to believe in a God that promises heaven and hell? If you're wrong, you've just lived a good life and you don't have any accounting of your afterlife. About God. But if you're wrong about not believing God, so let's say you believe in God, let me make sure I say this correctly. You believe in God. Pascal wager says it's better to lean towards believing in God, because if you're wrong about your belief in God, you'll just go into non-existence and you'll still have had a good life. But if you don't believe in God, you do not believe in God, and then you're wrong about rejecting him, then you have hell and punishment to be in the afterlife. And so he wasn't just saying this flippantly, like, you just believe in God because it's better to believe in God than not believe in God. What he was talking about is, if you come to the place of 40% belief, 45%, there is responses to this already with Gavin Ortlund, and I might play that just a little bit about using Pascal's wager in this. And I believe it was Gavin Ortland. And that if you get to where Alex is, that he should sincerely consider Pascal's wager, because it's better to believe in God than not believe in God. Okay, that's what it was. Now, what I saw with Apostate Prophet is that he went through these stages of loosening up his debate against God, loosening up his downplaying of the arguments, and beginning to accept them as considerable, at least taking them serious, considering them and saying that they could be true in some way, right? And I think that's where Alex is right now. So let's keep going here.
Media to navigate this space, objectively comparing the way that different news sources are reporting on the same story.
Pretty cool, huh? That's the laser strike system from us here at Vanish. This little bullet drops into just
Well, that's exactly what today's sponsor, Ground News, allows you to do. Open his eyes or something like that. He's on the verge of conversion. He's definitely about to become a Christian, and we're just waiting for Jesus to fully open his eyes or something like that. The second is from atheist listeners who think that I've essentially lost my mind. And that also tends to come along with this idea that I'm grifting, right? That I'm kind of trying to cotton onto a trend and, I don't know, make more money off like pretending to be nearly a Christian or something. Alex sees that there is a massive fascistic turn happening and is now becoming Christian to save his own skin. Cowardly. What a...
Yeah. See, that right there is exactly the heart of atheism. Notice that they can't give any credence to what he's going through, because in their minds, believing in God is the same thing as believing in Santa Claus. And everybody knows that's not true. Like you talk to the 90% of people who believe in God, they don't think of it the same way as Santa Claus. You might say, well, they don't have evidence and they don't know how to explain it. That's kind of like how it is with Santa Claus. No, here's the difference. What people are doing, and a lot of times they say, well, they're just raised this way, but just track with me here. Even if you weren't raised as a certain religion, it is natural to grow up wondering where all of this came from. And the word that we attribute to that is God. That is the most natural thing to assume. And I could go through all the quotes of the atheists who talk about this, that the world looks designed, that God belief is actually not a delusion, as some have tried to say, but it's a natural way of thinking as you watch the world go through its cycles of birth and death and so forth, that it would be obvious to think there would be a beginner, that there would be a father or a mother of the universe, right? Like it would just be obvious. And so this idea that God in the heart of people is the same as a Santa Claus is to honestly have your head in the sand, right? It's obviously, it's meant to be a slight against theism. It's meant to be a put down. And it's really underestimating how powerful it is. And that's why, even if people sometimes compare us to flat earthers and so forth, if you look at the percentage of the world that believes in God versus those who don't, it is always so much more massive. It's because there is no convincing of the most obvious innate things to us, to the average person who hears about atheism. There's no way to convince them. Like how are you going to convince me that something came from nothing? Or if you say it's not nothing, it's another type of vacuum and all of it. How are you going to say that these things are designed and we design things, but this is not designed? Like, it goes against all the intuition. So one of the arguments that as of recently people have tried to bring out against Christianity and theism is like, you have to go against your intuitive nature. You have to go against this idea that everything has a cause or a beginning. You have to go against the idea that designs have designers. You have to go against that. And that's why they fail so miserably. And then when you look at their lives, most of their lives are not worth following anyway. And I'm not saying Christians and theists don't make mistakes, but people who believe in God generally live much better lives. And this has been proven out, especially throughout the years and what it's done for societies. And I have the book here, Dominion by Tom Holland. I can bring it out here if we need to look at it. But just notice how the atheists treat him right here. You're a fraud. We're not going to receive you because Alex, you're not listening or believing the donkey-brained atheist ideas that we used to have. You know, these real quick internet means you're not trolling Christians anymore, Alex. And so we think you're a fraud.
Fraud. Just fast forward to your inevitable coming to Jesus moment and stop wasting people's time. You can pivot your channel's content to atheist converts to Christianity and realizes how wrong he was all along. The Bible thumpers will eat it up. Sad to see stupidity prevail over logic and intelligence. Sad atheist grift failed. Time to jump on the megachurch conversion Christian tour. It's sad and pathetic to watch someone who was once respectable turn into a complete grifter. So how much did the lobby pay you? Alex is quasi-famous now and he can't afford a haircut that doesn't look like a small dead animal on his head. Actually, that one's fair enough. Oh dear, now old Alex has fallen too. Only Dawkins left. I'm sorry, but fallen from what? Like fallen from the kind of steadfast atheism which says that there is literally no such thing as a plausible argument for religion or Christianity. That there's not like one marginally good reason to think that religion or Christianity might be true. If that's your position, we're just not on the same page. But that is not the same thing as becoming a Christian or being on the verge of doing so. And to prove it, I just want to show you something. So this video was taken from my second YouTube channel, More Alex O'Connor, and I just want to show you some other YouTube video titles from that self-same YouTube channel, debating why the Bible isn't true versus Dinesh D'Souza. Was Jesus the serpent in the Garden of Eden? Pressing Ben Shapiro on contradictions in Scripture, why contradictions in the Bible matter. And across my content, I've got videos explaining why I think Jesus didn't claim to be God, where Jesus is specifically asked to clarify his relationship to the Father and tells us that he is only in relationship with him in such a way that everybody else can be in relationship with them too. Why the problem of evil is the biggest problem for Christianity. I don't think I'd expect to see anything like this circus of suffering. How the Bible obviously contains falsehoods and mythologies and often contradicts itself. Every contradiction? All of them? How about, for instance, how I think the Bible promotes sexism? If there is something they want to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. And slavery.
The scriptural injunctions towards the ownership of other human beings as private property, the bequeathing of them to your children as inheritable property, and the differential treatment of slaves who are Israelites and slaves who are not.
And genocide.
I get sick to death of people hand-waving away this genocide by some vague reference to the fact that Jesus came along to do something which somehow kind of undoes the immorality of it.
And so in the face of all of that, one clip in which I say, yeah, you know, Christianity has got something going for it, and it's got more going for it than I realized when I was a teenager, causes like this kind of reaction. And I think that some of the responses I've been getting to this demonstrate an incredible...
Yeah. The reason why he's getting those responses is because they're irrational. The atheist community is irrational. They are exactly, and not always, in line politically with the woke left, but they have the exact kind of donkey-brained mentality as the woke left, that they are on the top of truth, so high above everybody else that they look down on everybody who disagrees with them as if they were the people disagreeing with them, the pigeons pooping on the chessboard, as it were, while they are the sophisticated players of the game. They think of everybody so beneath them that they don't really have to give sound arguments. They don't really have to give robust discussions, that they can just hand wave all of the philosophy, all of the science, all of the morality, just whatever you want to point to, all of the charity of religion, and just put it into the same category of wizardry. Okay? That's why they're acting like that. And this is why everything he just went through in his little montage right there changes nothing about how I still feel about him or how any of us as Christians are still hopeful for him. Because almost every one of the situations he's bringing up has a resolution in his humility before God and God's morality and God's system of teaching us his order through the scriptures. So whatever he thinks is a contradiction, by the way, there are some Christians who believe they exist in the scripture because not everything is inspired in the same way. I would not encourage him to go that route, but there are people who do have that belief system, like Mike Licona and others who I still believe are Christians. They just don't believe that everything has to be unified in a certain way, that the truth of Christianity is found through its doctrines and teachings, but it's numbers and dates, and sometimes people expressing their opinion through the text can have various opinions and contradictions. So once again, I'm not trying to say he should go that route, but there are Christians who understand the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, hope in him, trust in him, and that he has preserved the revelation to the scripture that he could believe, right? So we're not turned off by that. We're also not turned off by what he considers mythology, because once again, there are Christians who take certain parts of the Bible as storytelling. Some people take the first 11 chapters of the Bible as basically a Lord of the Rings retelling of everything so that God's people can have a foundation for what they're going to do next. That's very similar to like a William Lane Craig and an IP from Inspiring Philosophy. And I'm not saying they take everything there in the same way as myth, like how he may be thinking of myth, but it's called mytho-history. And so the idea of a global flood or the idea of a talking snake or any of these kinds of things can be said to be basically telling the story of humanity to people who don't need the scientific details, who just need a story to believe in, to know God's in control, and all those details will get worked out later. I don't believe that, okay? But I'm saying there are people who do, and there's biologos, theistic evolutionists who believe in much of that, okay? And so none of that is a hindrance to coming to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. It's not the brand of Christianity that I think is closest to the truth, but it is there as an option. And then the things that he talks about with slavery and these other moral dilemmas that he sets up, which I believe would be, once again, the hardest or the toughest case he makes against Christianity. But notice, for him to make that case, he has to presuppose a moral value system that now he holds the Bible to. So he has to have a 1 through 10, 10 being the best on his value system, 1 being the worst. And then he gets to come in as the arbiter of morals and then put the Bible on that scale where he believes it belongs. Is the Bible a 2? Is the Bible a 3 on this moral scale? In some ways it's a 10. But for him to get over that is for him to realize God is the one who sets the morals. So if God wants to destroy nations, God can destroy nations. If God wants to allow evil and death and suffering to bring him glory after we freely chose to sin, then God can do that. And so those are, to me, those are very small walls to knock down for God to grasp his heart. To me, he is much closer to God than he even thinks, as I have watched others and myself go through similar kinds of conversions. Here we have a comment from Michael. It says, what I see is most atheists have the same heart as anybody that repels against God. Exactly. There are people who may not say they're atheists, but they just don't want God in their life. They don't want to live for Jesus. And it's for the same reasons. I agree. There are some arguments and there are some people out there that say these things convince them. But when you get down to it, I still am a believer that it's always hard overhead. Okay. Most times, no matter how much proof you give them, they still refuse to believe. And I agree with that. 99% of the time, that's exactly the way it is. There may be 1% out there that truly just can't believe, like Alex tries to fit into this category as a non-resistant unbeliever, that he's really not resistant. He's really trying to believe. And by the way, that was the same thing that Rividian said, who it's, I believe is his name for apostate prophet. He had said that same thing before he converted, is that I'm not opposed to Christianity. I'm not opposed to God. I'm not resisting this belief, but I just don't see any evidence for that. And you can see how quickly that fell. So they resist and they still refuse. They resist the evidence. They still refuse to believe. It reminds me of when Jesus gave the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, and he told the rich man that even that his family had the law and the prophets, and that they didn't believe. And therefore, since they had enough evidence, even if someone was raised from the dead, they still wouldn't believe. Exactly. I agree with that 110%. When I was in my time away from God, there was nothing that you could do to convince me about God. So here's somebody ask a question. If you had proof, why is it said that you must take it on faith? Because both things can be true at the same time. So for example, do I have proof that my wife loves me? Yes. She, let's just take today, for example. Okay. My wife has told me she loves me. She has, well, let me say last night. Okay. Because I haven't seen her yet today. At least I don't think so. Okay. So let's just take my wife, for example. I both have proof and I have faith. Let me show you this to you. So let's say yesterday, did I have proof that my wife loved me? Yes. Did she tell me she loved me? Yes. Did she do stuff that would show me she loved me? She hugged me. She kissed me. She was kind to me. She made me a meal. Aren't I a blessed man? Right. So I have all of that proof. But what do I have to take on faith? That she means all of those things, that actually those things come from her heart, that when I don't see her, that she's actually still keeping me in her heart, that she loves me, that tomorrow she won't change her mind, that 3 days from now she won't change her mind, you know? So is there proof for God? Absolutely. All over the place. This whole entire world is proof for God. Everywhere you go is proof for God. Your thoughts are proof for God. Your argument, your question is a proof for God. Anything we're doing is proof. It's all proof for God. It's not proof for nothing. And from nothing, nothing comes. So you have a something. Where did it come from? Where did it come from? It came from God. Your mind came from God. Your soul came from God. It's why you're not an it sniffing your butt right now like a dog, even though they have some kind of an experience with a life. They don't have a conscious life, right? They don't have a self-aware life. But anyways, so all of this is evidence for God. And then you look at Jesus and all the evidence that he has for his death, burial, and resurrection. That's enough to put you to 51, 52%. I'm at probably 80, 90%. I don't know how much today I am at towards my evidence of God and Christianity. It's high. I'm willing to die for it. I believe that it's the greatest the faith that's out there. But do I still have 10% of questions, 5% of questions? Well, it just depends on what day it is, you know. But 80, 90% is the greatest life I've ever lived. But now watch this. I have all of that proof, but I still need to take that other 10%, that 12% on evidence. I never saw Jesus ascend to heaven. I didn't watch the clouds. I didn't touch his hands. I don't know, what the end times are going to be like. I don't know what happens after you die exactly. All of that I'm taking from his scriptures. And like I said, I build up to that 80, 90%, and I let faith do the rest. And so you can't think of this like a contradiction. It's a complement, and it's how you do every part of your life. It's not just, well, Christianity's asking me, it's like God's asking me to do something that no one else or nothing else has asked me to do. No, you're asked to do this in every part of your life. What proof do you have for the bridge that you drive across, right? You probably have 80, 90% proof for that bridge. Do you have certainty beyond any reasonable doubt of that bridge? Of course not. Do you have any certainty that the builders didn't make a mistake, that you could be the one that wiggles that last bolt out of place and that the bridge falls apart? And if you don't think it can happen to you, talk to somebody who's watched bridges fall, or look at the news when you see bridges fall, right? Because it can happen, okay? So everything in your life is a certain amount of evidence-based proof that you take most of the time for granted, that you just go through life with. And then that other part, that is the unknown, things that we don't always understand or grasp, you're taking by faith. So it's both and. And the reason why, and think about this, I mean, you're helping me preach right now, because think about this faith that God talked about. I said I come up to 80, 90%, right? But God said that the faith that he requires is only the size of a mustard seed. So he actually takes it the exact opposite. He's basically saying, if you would just trust me with 1% today of your life, and the other 99% you say I'm not too sure of, he'll still accept you into his kingdom. Isn't that amazing? Like, if you were unsure about, like Alex right now, this is a word for him and anybody else. If you were like 99% confused about everything else in life, but you had 1% of like, I think this could be true. Like, I think Jesus could have died on the cross. That's a great story. It's convinced a lot of people. It seems like there's some type of a spark in this. The inspiration of this story is greater than anything of Shakespeare, of anything of ancient antiquity. Like, I'll give 1% of faith to this. You can be saved and know Jesus Christ. And that's like the thief on the cross. Okay. So why would I have faith in infrastructure? It's inspected regularly. Okay. Now I'm just going to be honest with you. Now you're speaking a little donkey brained here. Okay. Now I'm just going to have to humble you a little bit. Okay, Kevin, got to humble you a little bit, because I gave you a gentle explanation of the bridge. And now you think that my example failed. And yet I'm going to show you how ridiculous that is. Okay. So just take a few moments. Don't go anywhere now. Don't go anywhere. Stay right there in the chat. Okay. You said it's inspected regularly. Did you inspect the inspectors? Yes or no? Did you inspect the inspectors of the last bridge you went over? Did you give a breathalyzer to the last plane you went into of the pilot? I must do nothing. I don't even know what that means. I'm asking you a yes or no question. Did you inspect the inspectors? Listen to what I'm asking you. Did you inspect the inspectors? Of course you didn't. I'm just waiting for your no. Okay, I'm waiting for you to say no, because of course you didn't inspect the inspectors. The next thing that I'm going to ask you is, did you inspect the manuals of the inspectors? Do you even know what they're supposed to be inspecting for? Do you see how quickly I can reduce you down to absurdity? And you're telling me you did not use faith when you went across that bridge? Because you have asked that question in that way, I'm now going to show you bridges falling. Okay, I'm going to now show you bridges falling so that you can see.
We were planning our anniversary trip.
Have had bridges fall. And I'll just say bridges falling in the U.S., which is where we're from. Okay? 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 When you think about... Yeah, you see that? Oh, I trust the inspectors. Okay, see, now he's leaving. See, I knew it. It's hard to get customers around here, Kevin. Now look at it, irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. You all see that? God bless you, man. We pray for you to come, but we want customers here. I want customers here. You see this right here? You see what I have on the bottom of my screen? I want you to come. You're irrelevant. You notice this right here? He says that you don't need to have faith in an infrastructure. You don't need to have faith in it because it's inspected regularly. I then say to him, did you inspect the inspector? Did you inspect the inspector's manual that they use to do the inspecting? Did you inspect that they had an accountability from the government to make sure that they're doing it right? Of course not. So therefore, according to him, everything that goes beyond what he can see, he doesn't have to have any faith. He just simply trusts because everything's been inspected correctly. Well, go tell these people who are part of a falling bridge that something went wrong here, something impossible went wrong because everything was inspected. My friend, you put faith in everything you do in life. Everything you do in life has an element of faith. Do not pretend like you do not have an element of faith in everything you do. And then what is his response? It's irrelevant. Of course it is now that you're proven wrong. It's irrelevant. Here's something, somebody running into these things. And then here's a video here to explain it, right? Bridges collapsing. That looks like AI there, But of course, we know real bridges. Look at this bridge right here. Well, wasn't it inspected? Wasn't it inspected? What about space shuttles? How about those? Aren't those inspected too? Watch this. When a bridge falls, disaster in Minneapolis. What about the inspectors? See, everything you do in life, you're taking on two kinds of faith. And I don't even have time to get into this with him, but I'm doing it now just for you who stayed, right? I'm doing this now for you. Oh, didn't they have inspectors there? Didn't they have inspectors? This is where I got to be nice, right? I got to be nice. Lord, make me patient, make me kind, right? There's two kinds of faith that we employ in every part of our life, okay? The first kind is interpersonal faith. Faith that you're not going to kill me, you're not going to murder me, that the inspector is going to do his job, that the car in front of me is not going to slam on their brakes, drive in reverse, that my mom's not going to poison me when she makes food, or my wife today, right? Because that happens. Did you inspect every meal from your wife? Try to tell me if you're married, you don't have faith in your wife, because there's wives out there poisoning their husbands, right? Come on now. Silliness, redonkulousness, right? And, we have to put faith in people all the time, everything. Faith in my doctor. There was an expose that came out that a doctor was stripping naked and streaking in his office all the time. You got to have faith that your doctor's not an idiot like that, right? That's the first kind of faith, interpersonal faith. It starts from when you're a child. You don't have an ability to recognize you have faith, but you're living on faith that your parents are going to do the right thing. And then there's the faith of God's universe, the regularity of God's universe. And I don't know. Should I pull up my philosophical books here? I don't know. You guys who are listening, should I pull up my philosophical books, or should I go back to reacting to Alex Connor? 1 for the books, 2 for Connor. Tell me where I should go, because this guy's already left. He doesn't want to hear anything. And now I can show you the second kind of faith that we all use, and that's the regularity of nature and the problem of induction. Am I getting off on a rabbit trail here? 1 for the books, 2 for Alex Connor. I got about 8 of you here. Tell me what I should do. Should I go to the books? Okay, one is Liam wants me to go to the books. Okay, so I'll start getting my books ready here. And then let's see. We got to have at least another one, right? That'd be funny if it's a 2 and then it's like over from there. Like, how do I decide? Let me open up my Kindle here. I love atheists. I want whatever he was, you got to love him. Okay, I only got one person who voted, so I guess for him, we're going to go to the books. We're going to go to the author of Why I'm Not a Christian. Bertrand Russell also wrote a philosophical book called The History of Western Philosophy. And in the book on the history of Western, philosophy, he talks about David Hume, who was a skeptic and an anti-Christian, and how Hume ran into problems using scientism to try to build his worldview. So those people who think I can have a worldview without God will find out real quick that that's not how it works. So let me now remove this, close this down here, open this up here, and remind me if I go back to the Dawkins that I have to remember to put on the audio that I have to remember to do that. Okay. Okay, here we go. Now, of course, it's telling me I can't open it up here because I already have it on so many devices. Let me remove it here. Let me remove it here from one of my devices. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. I don't know. I have the quotes taken out from the book, but let me just open this up here. Okay. All right. Okay, give me just a second. This is going to take too long for me to have to do it. Let me just do it with chat then. Let me do it with chat because I can't open up my book right now because I have it on too many devices. So where am I? Let's go here. Okay. Let me go here. And I see Daryl corresponding there. Let me open this up. What do we got? Blank screen. Okay. Sure. Let me go here. Explain the problem of induction and the Hume argument of regularity of nature as taught by Bertrand Russell in his book, History of Western Civilization. Okay, there we go. Let me get this going here for you guys as we're getting the thing to come up here. Let's go here to Daryl. He says, as a quality engineer in manufacturing, everyone assumes things are safe like seatbelts, but people rarely ever inspect them. There we go. Yeah. What was the arguments brought up against the Titanic is that no one thought it would happen. Everybody thought that someone else would check it or stop it, or if we knew it would do this, we would do that, and the bells were going off and so forth. If someone didn't take the emergency seriously, it was because they knew that the engineering of the ship could take, and you just look at this major catastrophe. All of these people had faith in the captain of the ship, of the person steering the ship, and then the Titanic sunk, and it was said to be unsinkable, right? And it's the same thing in anything in life. Like, we're all assuming that we're all doing our part. And if one day just the perfect storm happens, someone doesn't do their part, that leads to another person not doing their part. Like, another one would be like Pearl Harbor, right? Like, everybody's thinking like we're watching the blips on the screen, but this guy thinks the blips are that. Another guy thinks the blip. Of course, nobody wants Pearl Harbor to get bombed that day, but the U.S. soldiers had so many broken systems that just happened. And the guys sleeping there, I believe it was a Sunday, and the guys sleeping there all have their faith that the person doing that job is going to do their job. That's going to do their job. Come on. So number one, there's always interpersonal faith. We live with it. It's impossible around it. If you don't think you're living with impersonal faith, you're an idiot. That's just the bottom line. You're an Oompa Loompa. You're a dum-dum. And you have to repent because you're not checking when you go to eat in a restaurant if they're poisoning you. That day, someone could be disgruntled from their work going, I'm going to kill everybody in this restaurant and put poison in. And that's why, by the way, you have people with mental illnesses like OCD and all this, because they can't get past what you and I have to get past every single day to deal in faith of how we're dealing with things, right? And then the other part of faith is the regularity of nature. And so David Hume figured out, like, I'm doing everything by science. Everything is science. Look how sciencey we all are. And then what he found out is that you cannot rely on what you think is going to be there tomorrow to give you evidence that you can trust it. So like this guy, I would ask him, do you take by faith that the sun's going to rise tomorrow? No, I don't take that by faith. Oh, I've seen it rise 1,000 times. I know it's going to rise. One of the greatest minds of scientific history, scientific philosopher, David Hume said, hey, dude, you don't know the sun's going to rise 1,001 times because you've seen it rise 1,000 times, dum-dum. You're just taking that by faith. There is absolutely no evidence you have today that tomorrow will be like that. And you now start saying, well, we see gravitational pull and the gravity and the Earth's rotation, and then the sun is this, and then it does. You have just break it down every single step you go. There is no guarantee in the system that it will be like that tomorrow. There's not one guarantee in any of those natural systems, not one of them the rate of burn for the sun, the rate of gravity, the rate of whatever you can possibly think of. There is nothing in the structure of science that says what water boils at today will boil at tomorrow. What suns turn at today or what we turn around the sun will turn. There's zero. We just look at it and assume it to be true because 99.99.99, 99.999% of the time, that's how it works. And we can make great guesses at it, but there is this much certainty in it, zero certainty in it. And so you have to rely, think about this, you have to rely upon cause and effect to be the same in the inductive method of science for you to do science. But the moment you rely upon cause and effect to do science, you now have no evidence that cause and effect is the basis that will remain tomorrow to do your science. So cause and effect are a part of your science, but you have no way of proving cause and effect. And it's not just what I say, it's what he said. So as this guy leaves, of course they skedaddle. The wicked flee, though no one pursueth. They skedaddle, okay? And that's where they're left. And this is all what Russell talks about in this book that I couldn't open up. And so does that mean that we do not have the ability to do science? No, we have the ability to do science. And it would be maddening if the world changed every 30 seconds and changed all of its laws. Why doesn't it change? Why is it regular? Why do the laws remain in place? Bing, now you got your evidence for God again. You're right back to the Lord. So everything is taken by faith in interpersonal relationships in the very universe that you live in. And that is the evidence of the answer to the problem of induction. And if I could have opened up this book, I would have shown you that there is no answer to the problem of induction. And you can just see here. Is there a consensus on giving an answer to the problem of induction? Simple yes or no, unbiased. So just to let you guys know I'm not being biased. Is there a consensus on the problem of induction being answered? Yes or no? And as that's coming up, well, where did this thing go? No, my thing is tripping here. I'm back to a scripture here. What is this? Give me a second. Let's go here. This is where I get lost in the sauce. That's why I had to have you guys tell me if I should go down this road. Unbiased. Is there a consensus to answer the problem of induction? Yes or no? There we go. No, there is no consensus. I mean, hasn't happened. It won't happen. It's impossible without God. There is no grounding in the natural universe for the natural universe. It doesn't even make any sense. It's nonsense. That's why our boy here is now recognizing he's getting closer to a belief of God than when he first started off. Because when you say silly things like what we just heard and you don't think through what you're saying, you think you're awesome because you heard it from, some atheist online. But then when you're actually held accountable to those kinds of answers, you realize, man, like you don't have anything to stand on. You're lacking a foundation. So let's go back and let's finish this, please. I want to finish this. What do we have left here? About 15 more minutes? Let's go.
Incredibly low barrier of intellectual engagement, right? Because if you just saying that the other side, so to speak, is maybe more plausible than some people give it credit for. And actually, there are some good reasons to disagree with my position. I still believe what I believe, but I think there are good reasons that I have to tackle on the other side. If just saying that is enough to get accusations that you either must be on the brink of a conversion or you're outwardly grifting to the other side, what does that say about the state of our ability online to have conversations about important topics? I think that the starting point of an interesting conversation should be, I think that what you're saying is really interesting and plausible, but I disagree with it, and I'm going to tell you why. If our starting point is just there is nothing you could possibly say that will rationally convince me because your position is rationally indefensible. Not only that, but it's also evil and a terrible force in the world. And right now, I just don't think there is anything you could possibly say to me at all to convince me that your worldview is even more plausible than its fiercest enemies propose. If that's where you're at, then fair enough, you can hold that view. I can understand looking at religions like Christianity, or for a Christian looking at atheism and just thinking that is nonsense and there is no way I can even take that seriously. Fine, you can do that, but that's not what I'm engaged in. I'm trying to have interesting conversations with people because I think that most people have something interesting to say. But I also kind of can't blame people for thinking that I am jumping on some Christian grift because...
And that's fair. I do believe that atheism is that bad. I don't believe there's anything plausible on the other side. And I do believe that if you became a humble Christian, you would say the same thing, Alex. Okay, now let me show this screen here, just to keep my word, because I love to do things like this to teach as a teacher, and I always want people to see what I was talking about. So there you go. Here is Bertrand Russell's book on the history of Western philosophy. Here it is, right here, and I opened it up. Okay, now let's see what I can do here. Does that help? Nope. Trying to widen this. Let's see. Nope. Doesn't want to widen, but that's about as good as it can get. Okay, let's start here. I'll read through it as quick as I can, just so you can see it's already been dealt with. Bertrand Russell was not a Christian, not a theist, nor was David Hume. Okay. There is no reason for studying philosophy, so Hume maintains, except that to certain temperaments, this is an agreeable way of passing the time. So in other words, philosophy is a waste of time. If you can't do science, philosophy means nothing. Okay. In all the incidents of life, we ought to still preserve our skepticism. If we believe that fire warms or water refreshes, and he's quoting Hume here, 'tis only because it costs us too much pains to think otherwise. Nay, if we are philosophers, it ought only to be upon skeptical principles and from an inclination which we feel to be employing ourselves after that manner. So in other words, there's no reason or good reason to even know that you're truly in life warming yourself by the fire or that water refreshes. You have no real scientific reason. And if you try to use philosophy to do it, you'll drive yourself mad. Okay. If he abandoned speculation, I feel it should be a loser in the point of pleasure. And this is the origin of my philosophy, basically seeking out pleasure. Hume's philosophy, which he basically said it was worthless, but he still had one because most of the time they're always in contradiction with themselves. Hume's philosophy, here is Russell speaking, whether true or false, represents the bankruptcy of 18th century reasonableness. And by the way, modern day atheism is in the bankruptcy of 18th century reasonableness. All the arguments they make have already been debunked, not only by people today, but by people back then. And as we see with Hume, even by himself. Okay. This is what new atheism looks like. It's really old atheism and it's redonkulous. He starts out like Locke with the intention of being sensible and empirical, which means I'm going to show you a bunch of science. I'm going to show you science. I don't have faith. Taking nothing on trust, like this guy who was here before. I don't take anything on trust, but seeking whatever instruction is to be obtained from experience and observation. So instead of the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, you have experience, observation, and whatever third thing you can call in there, which I would just say blind faith. So everything is just experience and observation. Keep clicking out of that. Okay. But having a better intellect than Locke, so he's smarter than Locke, a greater acuteness in its analysis, and a smaller capacity for accepting comfortable inconsistency. So now he's like, man, I'm not just going to live with these inconsistencies. He arrives at the disastrous conclusion that from experience and observation, nothing can be learned. I am terrible at this. What just happened there? Man, I wanted to highlight this here, that nothing can be learned. Lord, help me. Where did I just go? There we go. That nothing, get out of this right here. Here we go. That there is, hold on, second page here. Let me get here. I apologize, God, guys. It's got to be insincere. Oh, there we go. That nothing can be learned. There we go. He arrives at the disastrous conclusion. This is Russell talking about Hume, that Hume didn't have toleration of inconsistencies like Locke did, who never had to deal with this. And remember, this is all the bankruptcy of 18th century reasonableness, right? He, talking about Hume, arrives at the disastrous conclusion that from experience and observation, nothing can be learned. Okay, these are their priests and their prophets. So I want someone to come on here now and I want someone to denounce Hume. Tell me Hume's an idiot, right? I want them to denounce Hume like they denounced Peter, Paul, and James. These are their apostles. I want you to tell me you're smarter than David Hume. Go ahead. Go ahead, trolling atheist, aping minds in the comment section. Tell me right now that you're smarter than David Hume. I want to hear you say it. Just say, I am smarter than David Hume. Just say it. Because we're not talking about someone trying to figure out scientific stuff that we figured out later on and, and now we're smarter in that sense just because of convenience of when we were born. No, I'm talking about a guy who uses the exact bankrupt method you are using, an 18th century reasonableness. Tell me he's a dum-dum and you figured it out, because the next question that I'm going to be asking you is for you to tell me how you defeated Hume's problem of induction. Because I don't want there to be we're going to put down Hume. I don't care what Hume said. Who is that guy? Sometimes I'm teaching atheists how to be atheists. Well, I don't know who Hume was. I don't even know who he was. I don't care what he says. Okay, then defeat the problem that he came up with. Okay? Because you can't. There is no such thing as a rational belief. If we believe that fire warms and waters refreshes, 'tis only because it costs us too much pain to think otherwise. We cannot help believing, but no belief. How many beliefs? According to Hume and now Russell's retelling, how many beliefs? No belief can be grounded in reason. That's how bad it is for them. Okay? Now, you can read the rest of this take on it. There is no intellectual difference between insanity and sanity unless you can beat what Hume came up with. Now, listen to how Russell tries to save Hume by saying, we now must insert a principle. Come on, wake up if you guys are listening to me. You must insert a principle to be the foundation for induction in science. Otherwise, you're in vicious circularity. Okay? So what is that principle going to be? What these arguments prove, here is Russell at the end. What these arguments prove, and I do not think the proof can be controverted, is that induction is an independent logical principle, incapable of being inferred either from experience or from other logical principles, and that without this principle, science is impossible. What is the great answer that Bertrand Russell says? It just is what it is. We can't get it from science because it's impossible to do science without it. We can't derive it from other logical principles. We just insert it. There it is. See, he's honest. It's an Oompa Loompa thing to say, but at least he's honest. He is not trying to say, I use science to prove science. He's not saying that. He's purposely telling you, I can't use science to prove science. He's purposely telling you, I can't use logic to prove logic. I can't do it. I have no way to do it. I just insert a principle into our world that says induction works. Just like there's a principle of existence, we exist. That's a principle. We have to build from that. Just like we believe that there's other minds that we're not, in the mind of our own minds, like a solipsis, or in the mind of a God that reality is not real, some existential crisis or whatever. No, he says, I'm not going to fall into any of those traps. I'm just going to say there's a principle, and the principle is of regularity. There's just a principle of regularity. Now watch. Just in case you think I'm making this up, right here, I will copy this now, and I will put this. Get me out of here. Let's go here. Okay, you guys can't see that. I should have been sharing the screen. Let me show you guys here. Oops. Okay, let's go stop screen. Tell me if you guys can see this here. Probably no one's even watching. This is where I just get lost in the sauce, right? Share. There we go. Okay, now watch this right here. Summarize this in 2 to 3 sentences. Here we go. Oops, I forgot to put it in there. Boom. So summarize this in 2 to 3 sentences. You want to see the summary? Here's the summary. Let me make sure you guys can see this. Okay. Close this here. Here's the summary. Russell says Hume proved that induction cannot be justified by experience because doing so would be circular, meaning science needs an independent logical principle that cannot come from empiricism. If this principle is accepted, science can proceed. If not, Hume's skepticism is unavoidable for empiricists. Thus, pure empiricism is insufficient, and induction must be treated as a separate foundational principle. Did Russell, in this book or in any writing, ever give reason or validity to where and how he derived this principle from that he inserted to fix Hume's problem? If only I could spell. No. No, he never did. Of course he didn't, because it doesn't exist. Where does that principle exist? That you need to do science? Only in the metaphysics of God. It's impossible for it to be in the system of nature because nature is dependent upon it. So there's your evidence for God once again. There's your evidence for God once again, staring you right in the face. All those who say you love science, I believe in science and I don't believe in God. You can't believe in science without believing in God. It's impossible. Otherwise, you can just drop principles wherever you want, whenever you need them. But it is clear that you can have zero science without inserting an independent logical principle of regularity. And nobody, including the top atheists of our day and their day, have a justification for that. Okay? And he doesn't justify that principle, right? So let me finish watching Alex O'Connor here, and we'll go from there. Come debate me, atheists, anybody who disagrees. Otherwise, Christians, thank you for joining with us and having a good time. Hope you're enjoying your time with me today. Let me make sure I get the audio here. Okay, let's go.
Christians keep repurposing my material for their hopeful worship music in the background, Instagram reels talking about how great Jesus is. Sometimes when I'm asked about Christianity or religion on a podcast or something, my co-conversationalist doesn't know that much about Christianity, or is interested but hasn't really cared about it, or is someone who is a fervent atheist. And in any of those situations, it will serve the conversation quite well for me to try to steel man Christianity, for me to say, well, hold on a second, I think there are good reasons to believe in God. And it does make sense why a Christian would be convinced that Jesus rose from the dead. Here are some of the arguments. How do we explain the fact that this man gets crucified by the Romans and then people claim to see him after he died and were willing to be put to death for that belief? Isn't that incredible? How do we explain this? Something really weird must have happened. And then they will always ask me, so hold on then, what's your explanation? And I go, well, there is some enough disagreement, I think, to arouse suspicion. I'm saying this as if I'm some kind of Christian or theist. So I sort of put on that hat when I'm asked to have a conversation of this kind. It does seem to me suspicious, for example, that the Gospel of Mark, which is the earliest Gospel, contains no post-resurrection appearances. And then the Gospel of Matthew does include post-resurrection appearances. The Gospel of Luke includes even more. It's only in the Gospel of John that we get, for instance, doubting Thomas. So I think that there's this reason to distrust the Gospel accounts, or there's mythological development if you look at the earliest Gospel Mark and then look at the latest John and see how things change. And I start talking about those more atheistic points. But somebody always, inevitably, without fail, takes that first bit, clips it up, makes it black and white, puts some hopeful music in the background, and puts it onto some Jesus Instagram page. How do we explain the fact that this man gets crucified by the Romans and then people claim to see him after he died? And just to show you how bad and dishonest this can get, let me show you one of the most popular reels of this kind. 45,000 likes. The caption is, Jesus' genius moment. #God, #Jesus, #Christianity, #For You page. So let's take a look at this. It's one of my favorite stories in the Gospels, where Jesus says, he who's without sin cast the first stone. It's a religious test, because you've got this Jesus peaceful figure, and there's a woman who's committed adultery, and the law's quite clear that the woman should be stoned. And Jesus is just writing in the sand, and the Pharisees are okay, go on then, Jesus, what are you going to do here? It clearly says that she should be stoned. That's what the law says. He's writing in the sand. He's kind of ignoring them. And
Obviously, we don't want to misrepresent Alex O'Connor, so we're not playing soft music saying he's become a Christian, right?
they say, Jesus, what should we do here? You know, the law's quite clear. We need to stone this woman. And they're testing him. What's he going to do? And he says, sure, yeah, okay, go ahead. But he who's without sin casts the first stone. Oh, man, it's brilliant. It's awesome. It's like ethical genius. It sort of undercuts at the same time as not contradicting the truth of the law or the justice. You know, it's this brilliant moment. It's this brilliant moment. Yeah, that does sound pretty pro-Christianity, doesn't it? And look at some of the comments. He is so close to Jesus. Bro's starting to get it. He's so close. Times like 15. Okay, you want to see something funny? Let's look at where that clip was taken from and listen to the very next words out of my mouth. You know, it's this brilliant moment, but unfortunately, it's not in our earliest manuscripts, and so most scholars believe that it's a later interpolation. But unfortunately, it's not in our earliest manuscripts, and so most scholars believe it's a later interpolation. That is to say that our earliest manuscripts of John's Gospel, the only Gospel in which you'll find this story today, don't contain this story, indicating that at some point it was added in later. It wasn't a part of the original Gospel. I mean, look, to make this really clear, let's go back for a moment and look at what Chris actually asked me. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe that was, a later interpolation because the Quran is the word of God.
What's an interpolation?
Oh, like a later edition.
Okay.
So something that's added later into the text. So like earlier I mentioned the stoning of the adulterous woman, which is it's one of my favorite stories in the Gospels. And that's where the reel starts, right? So Chris has asked me, what's an interpolation? I say, well, it's when someone has kind of taken a text and like sneakily added in something later that isn't historical.
Which, by the way, there's great evidence for that being original to the gospel. He's buying into textual criticism that is a bit outdated in its reach, and that classical textual criticism going back to the medievals and to the people who understood how manuscripts were being distributed and how certain parts were placed in those manuscripts for their reasons. There's now a growing consensus, I would say consensus, but a growing number of scholars that are taking serious that story and believing that it actually was a part of the gospel. And I just don't have time to get in that, but you can see James snap on that.
Then I start explaining this story. That's where the reel starts. Then the reel ends, immediately after which I say, it's this brilliant moment, but unfortunately it's not in our earliest manuscripts. And so most scholars believe that it's a later interpolation. So in this moment on Chris Williamson's podcast, I'm arguing for the unreliability of the gospel narrative. And someone has chopped off the context either side, made it black and white, put some fancy music behind it, and is now trying to pass it off as a kind of pro-Jesus piece of content. I think the reason why I'm saying, this is my favorite story in the Gospels, and I think Jesus is so cool here, is to point out that some of my favorite parts about who Jesus is aren't historical. They're not really part of the original gospel narrative. And do you know what's really annoying about this? Because these are literally the next words out of my mouth, whoever edited this reel knew what they were doing. They fully knew the point that I was trying to make. They had listened through and were waiting for a moment to pull, and they just knew that I was arguing here that this is not a historical story. And they've just taken it anyway and turned it into some Christian content. And I see these kinds of reels and TikToks all the time. People keep taking my material and turning it into pro-Christian content. Look, here's another example from He Chose You on Instagram. Alex O'Connor admits to be Christian. I'll save you some time. I did not do that. Here's a more recent example from Speak Life, 42,000 likes. Stephen Bartlett is saying that he used to be an atheist, and just look at my face.
Such a staunch atheist. And I read all those books at 18 years old, and I was debating dog walkers on the street. But I now find myself in a position where I'm almost back to being curious again.
And it kind of looks like I'm praying or something, except I didn't make those faces in that moment. Those expressions are taken from a different part of the podcast around half an hour later and just spliced in.
All right, at this point, I don't know. Is he just going to keep rebuking Christians?
Readers are a pain in the butt because
doing that.
You have to take them off every time you want to see in the distance.
By the way, in all of these clips, there is just no way to come away from it. All that kind of stuff, it's still there. I'm still not a believer in God. I still make pro-atheist content. And also, as far as, pro-Christian content goes, I think this is about as mild as it could conceivably get. Seriously, I'm not even giving arguments for God's existence in this clip. I'm not running the cosmological argument or, explaining the argument's response. It really does make me think that unless I keep making videos exclusively about why religion is completely irrational and has absolutely nothing going for it, and also my position hasn't changed in 10 years of doing this professionally, which, by the way, if that were the case, should probably be reason to distrust me, that unless I steadfastly hold to that position and don't change it and never take religion seriously, Christians will inevitably say that I'm about to become a Christian, and atheists will inevitably say that I'm about to pretend to become a Christian to make a bunch more money. If that is what you think, then fine, there's nothing I can do about that. I do see it as kind of depressing that such a minor, as I see it, comment like this can inspire such a reaction, but all I can say here is that I hope the rest of you can see that I'm just genuinely interested in this kind of stuff. I also hope that if you follow my work at all, if you've seen some of the videos that I've been putting out recently, it's just immediately obvious to you that I'm not about to become a Christian, and that, I am taking it more seriously and I'm having more productive conversations across the aisle, as it were, but that, I retain quite a lot of criticism for that worldview. But I can't prove that. And of course, that is just what I would say if I were trying to grift Christianity, or I suppose secretly on the verge of conversion that I didn't want to make public for some reason. I can't prove that that's not the case. So you'll just have to trust me. Or don't.
Okay.
Whatever.
I never thought that I would be successful. I never thought it would ever matter. I'm wrong.
All right. So that was our going over the video that Alex O'Connor put out about how he was getting closer to understanding the coherence and the arguments of God, but he is not becoming a Christian. Okay, so no one here is saying he's becoming a Christian, but as I said from the very beginning, it shows you that those arguments that he was once holding on to are not as strong as he thought they were, and he's taking them more seriously. And I've seen people who have gone down this road become Christians. That's what I've seen. So do I think he will personally? Yes. I'm not saying it as a prophet. I'm not trying to make a spiritual prediction. I'm just simply saying this is the road that I have seen people go down. Once you start to understand that Christianity is not incoherence, it's not something along the same lines of as believing in Santa Claus and these different things, you begin to see that there's a lot of truth behind it, and the arguments that are in favor of God are much stronger than the arguments against God. And it seems like he's only left with a few now, and those few seem to be more emotional than they are rational. Just for example, just reviewing them again, he thinks that the contradictions of the Bible would impact the truth of Christianity. That would absolutely mean nothing towards Christianity. What if the Bible is just like any other book that's brought down through history that has contradictions, but what it says is true? I mean, that wouldn't change anything. I believe the Bible is without contradictions, and I believe there's a lot of evidence for that. But if, let's say, he's not convinced by that, some Christians are not convinced by that, it doesn't matter. Do you believe that somebody wrote down a story about something that actually happened, and that actual event is what can change your life today? That's powerful. Whether or not it was always preserved in manuscripts doesn't mean anything. Was that preserved, the story in every detail? Maybe not, according to him, if that's what he wanted to believe, but was it in general preserved? Just take, for example, like the idea of an accident. Okay, so an accident happens, everybody has a whole bunch of different opinions, but did an accident happen? Yes. So even if there's contradictions among timelines of the Gospels and resurrection appearances, the bottom line is, was there a resurrection, right? So that's not hard. And then the thing with the problem of evil, and I know that he doesn't like dealing with it from the point of view as a presuppositionalist or from a foundational point of view. But the simple question back to him is, if there's no God, why do you have a problem with it? So there's no external critique that can work against Christianity from the problem of evil. And then now if he says, I only see it as an internal critique, well, then now you would have to understand the mind of God. If you're now accepting our paradigm that God is the God of creation and that God says he turns evil for good, you would now have to prove that God can't do that, that he's incapable of taking such grotesque evil and turning it for his good. You would have to have a logical claim to that, and you can't do it. It's impossible. It's been dropped. So the only appeal then he has is just an emotional appeal. And the way he presents it is somewhere along the lines of, the same way we're supposed to feel in morality about a child being raped or murdered and then understand that that's wrong. That's the same way that I feel when I hear about the destruction of these cities and so forth, or there being an eternal hell or whatever. I just have like this gut reaction. And so why am I supposed to trust this kind of moral repugnancy when it comes towards like the things that you guys would call sin, but I'm not supposed to trust it when I see it towards God? Well, once again, it's a problem of him understanding who God is. So internally, now he just goes to the scripture. Why would God say that things like rape, murder, all these things grieve his heart? But then why at the same time would he allow it? Why would he allow that? And then why would he punish it? That God actually tells us why he would do that. And that's so that we would know that he is God's. And Ecclesiastes actually ends with this, that you would know to fear God. Seeing evil on the world, as grotesque as it is supposed to show you how much we need God and his goodness, and the story of the Bible to end like the Disney story, right? We need God to bring peace on the earth and animals to get along again, lion and lamb. We need that. And so he's showing evil for how evil is. So as disgusted as you are by it, as repugnant as it feels, it's as much as you're supposed to trust God that he's going to work it out, because internally it says he does. And so even if you have a feeling like, I don't know how this is going to work out, trust the God who gave you that feeling that the grieving will go away. And the Bible even talks about all creation is even groaning right now, waiting for the revelation of the sons of God to be revealed, for the world to be restored and us to rule and reign with Christ. And so the Bible actually talks about this. So the groaning that he's feeling is a groaning that we feel right now as Christians. And that's why we can't watch the news all of the time. We can't look at it all the time. And we cry all the time over these things when we look at it. I have people in the church that continually cry over what happens in the news, and we weep and intercede in our church. We let the emotion out of the groan, of the pain that we're all experiencing here. So even though Christians have a high sense of joy and self-esteem and all these things, we do walk with a great burden, if we're being honest, towards intercession and towards emotional pain. And that's why we go out and preach the way we do. So I don't see that we have any customers. I always like to make the final call. If anybody wants to step up, anybody to debate. I'll be doing this more because I've been making shorts. Let me just show you this before I go on our YouTube channel. Facebook is cool, but I'm not getting a lot of feedback there. So I am using YouTube and TikTok for that. So if you go to What Do You Believe, you go to What Do You Believe, and I don't know why I don't come up, even though I'm subscribed. Look, it doesn't even come up. And put in my name. Let's try that. Let's see if I come up then. No, look at that. Doesn't even come up. I don't even know how you're supposed to find it. If I can't find it and I'm putting it in. Now, you know what's so crazy is if you put in Ali G, see, look, all this other stuff will come up with me doing things, but not even the What Do You Believe page. Watch this right here. Now, if I put in What Do You Believe, Ali G, because I've reacted to Ali G videos, now you're going to see me come up. So the only way that I can reference people to go to this page is now from Ali G. So this is where I'm at here. And then TikTok under the same name. And then I believe it's John 3:16. So look for me there. You know what? If you're watching here, you know what? I'm going to put up that link. Yeah, here it is. View profile. Yeah, What Do You Believe, John 3:16. Yeah, so look at these. These are getting close to 1,000. Some of them hit 1,000. I was a little bit lower. This one was over 1,000. But this is what I'm doing here. And I'm trying to go live on TikTok as well. But I keep getting flagged, man. And I'm not doing anything. Oh, you guys can't even see this. Hold on. There we go. So here I am on TikTok. What Do You Believe 3:16. And then What Do You Believe on YouTube. And so I will send those links right now. Dude, I'm such a boomer. I could have put these links in the video description. What am I doing? What is wrong with me? I just wasted all of that time. Guys, I apologize. I'm such a boomski. You guys want to hear a song that I made with AI right here? Christian Sound Blend on all major platforms. Christian Sound Blend on all major platforms. Here's one of my favorite right here. Just coming out. Should be releasing right now.
Do you ponder hell when the lights go down? Can you tell? I've been fighting all these thoughts that fell. Do you ponder hell when the quiet hits? Does it swell? I've been running from the things I felt. Late nights, heart rate, shadows on my back.
All right, guys. Just sub and subscribe wherever you see this coming up, Facebook or YouTube. And you'll see when I go live again. Feel free to leave comments below or reach out to me at my church website if you need something from us. Have a great day. Have a great Thanksgiving. Be thankful for people in your life. Be thankful for the cross. God bless you. Hope to see you soon.